Paul McCartney has recently revisited one of the strangest and most persistent rumours in music history, the myth that he died in 1966 and was secretly replaced by a look-alike. More than half a century later, the former Beatle has come to see a strange truth behind the gossip that in a symbolic sense, part of him was dead during that turbulent time. The Paul is dead conspiracy first emerged in the aftermath of the Beatles' disbandment in 1969, though its supposed timeline dated back to November 9, 1966. According to the story, McCartney had perished in a car accident while returning home from a late-night recording session for what would become Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. In order to protect millions of fans from heartbreak, the theory claimed, the surviving Beatles conspired with others in the industry to replace Paul with a double-A man named William Campbell, also called Billy Shears, who supposedly underwent surgery to perfect the illusion.
But though they may be parted,
devoted fans began scouring the Beatles' music and album covers for clues supporting the idea. On the Abbey Road cover, McCartney appeared barefoot and out of step with the others, a detail interpreted as a funeral procession symbol. John Lennon's murky lyric at the end of Strawberry Fields Forever I Buried Paul became another piece of supposed evidence. Countless other examples were cited, from cryptic lyrics to album artwork that fans believed hinted at a hidden tragedy. In reality, McCartney had indeed been involved in 2 minor car accidents around that era, but neither was serious. Friends, family, and studio colleagues saw him alive and well throughout 1966. Nevertheless, the rumour refused to die. It gained new life when an Iowa student journalist named Tim Harper published a tongue-in-cheek article titled "Is Beatle Paul McCartney Dead?" in September 1969. Within weeks, the speculation had exploded across the United States, stoked by radio DJs and sensational newspaper headlines, until millions were convinced that the real McCartney was gone. Over 50 years later, McCartney has written candidly about the experience in an essay, revealing both the absurdity and the emotional toll of the myth. The strangest rumour began to circulate just as the Beatles were breaking up that I was dead, he wrote. We had heard it before, but in the autumn of 1969, fueled by a DJ in America, it suddenly took on a life of its own. Millions of people truly believed I was gone. At the time, McCartney was newly married to Linda Eastman, and they had recently welcomed their first child, Mary. I remember turning to Linda and asking, "How can I possibly be dead?" he recalled. She just smiled, holding Mary, knowing how ridiculous the headlines were. But she also reminded me that we had fled to our farm in Scotland to escape exactly this kind of toxic gossip, the kind that was tearing the Beatles apart. McCartney has since come to recognise that the death the rumours spoke of had a metaphorical truth. Now that more than half a century has passed, he reflected, I sometimes think those rumours were truer than we knew. In so many ways, I was dead a 27-year-old about to become an ex-Beatle, drowning in a sea of legal battles and personal conflicts. My world was collapsing, and I needed to reinvent my life entirely. The collapse of the Beatles, one of the most groundbreaking bands in history, left McCartney in deep depression. For years, his identity had been inseparable from the group's success. Leaving the Beatles, or having the Beatles leave me, however you look at it, was agonising, he admitted in an older interview excerpted in The Guardian piece. That was my life's work. When it ended, I thought, what do we do now? I hung on, hoping John might one day say, all right, lads, let's get back to work. But of course that never happened. To heal, McCartney withdrew completely from the spotlight. He and Linda purchased a secluded sheep farm in Scotland, far from London's relentless press. There, surrounded by rugged hills and rain, he began to rebuild himself from the ground up. Looking back, we were utterly unprepared for rural life, he wrote. Linda wasn't yet the great cook she would later become, and I knew next to nothing about farming. But there was satisfaction in learning and doing something real with my hands, in being self-reliant. That period of isolation, though difficult, became the crucible for McCartney's rebirth as an artist. Away from fame, he rediscovered his creative spark.
Keep shining bright.
The isolation was exactly what we needed, he explained. Despite the harsh weather, Scotland gave me time to create. Something new was forming inside me, the sense that the old Paul had died and a new one was emerging. For the first time in years, I felt free leading and directing my own life again. That freedom would soon manifest in the creation of Wings, the band McCartney formed with Linda and Denny Laine in 1971. It allowed him to rebuild his career on his own terms, balancing family life with his enduring passion for music. Through Wings, McCartney redefined what it meant to be a former Beatle, no longer a relic of the past, but an artist with a fresh vision. Tomorrow, on November 4th, McCartney will release his new book Wings, the story of a band on the run, an ambitious oral history chronicling the band's journey. The volume features more than 42 hours of new interviews, along with historical recordings and never-before-heard tapes from McCartney's personal archive. It includes 150 photographs, many previously unseen, as well as diary entries, handwritten lyrics, and memorabilia that capture the essence of the post-Beatles years. Originally announced in February, the book's publication has been eagerly anticipated by fans and historians alike. In April, McCartney shared a portion of the foreword, offering a glimpse into his memories of rebuilding his life after the Beatles. The collection also includes anecdotes and reflections from Linda McCartney, Denny Laine, Mary and Stella McCartney, as well as contributions from John Lennon, George Harrison, Ringo Starr, George Martin, Sean Ono Lennon, Chrissie Hynde, Dustin Hoffman, Twiggy and other friends and collaborators. The release follows a renewed celebration of Wings' legacy. Last year saw the theatrical debut of One Hand Clapping, the long-lost 1974 live-in studio film and album, along with a 50th anniversary edition of Band on the Run, one of the band's most acclaimed works. Later this month, McCartney will oversee the release of Wings, the definitive anthology. A self-titled collection bringing together the group's finest moments, another testament to the creative vitality that grew out of those dark and doubtful years. Looking back, McCartney sees the Paul is Dead episode not as a cruel hoax, but as an eerie of his own transformation. In a sense, he mused, the rumour wasn't entirely wrong. The old me the Beatle tied to all that madness had to die for the new one to live.